The world is full of mysterious places that even scientists can't explain. But there's one in particular that's been confounding researchers for years: the pyramids of Egypt. For centuries, people have been scratching their heads over how ancient humans managed to move and lift such massive stones and build these colossal structures with such precision. But now, thanks to new research, we might finally be getting closer to solving this enduring mystery. Hi, it's me, and you're watching this channel. Join me today as we explore the secrets of the pyramids and find out how they were really built. The most famous pyramids are located just outside of Cairo in a place called Giza. It is home to 3 pyramids that were built around 4,500 years ago as tombs for 3 different pharaohs. While we think of them as being made of stone, the oldest pyramid was actually made entirely from limestone. This material is pretty easy to come by in Egypt, where limestone cliffs can be found all across the country. However, by the time the second pyramid was built, these limestone cliffs had been pretty much depleted, so builders had to go further afield to find new sources of the material. In fact, some of the limestone used in the second pyramid actually came from the first pyramid itself, which had been quarried for building materials. Still though, the real construction work began with the third and final pyramid. That's because this was the first pyramid to be built primarily from Tura limestone, which is much harder and more durable than limestone. Because the limestone was so easily accessible, the first pyramid was built relatively close to the city of Cairo. In contrast, the third pyramid, also known as the Great Pyramid of Giza, was built about 10 kilometers south of downtown Cairo. Given how far the builders had to travel to get their hands on the right materials, it is hard to imagine how they managed to transport such huge blocks of stone without modern tools or equipment. And to make matters even more perplexing, each block weighs somewhere between 2 and 7 tons. To put that into perspective, an adult African elephant weighs only about 6 tons. So you can see why moving these blocks was no small feat. But, believe it or not, that wasn't even the biggest challenge the builders faced. You see, not only did they have to figure out how to transport the blocks of stone to the building site, but they also needed a way to lift them up and stack them on top of each other. After all, the tallest pyramid ever built stands at about 147 meters, which is almost the same height as the Washington Monument. But while the pyramids may seem pretty simple in appearance, their construction was anything but straightforward. The blocks needed to be precisely cut and shaped to fit together perfectly. Otherwise, the entire structure could collapse like a house of cards. And if that wasn't difficult enough, the workers had to do it all by hand. They didn't have access to things like cranes or bulldozers, which makes the whole project even more impressive. To make things even more challenging, the workers couldn't simply take breaks when they needed them. You see, the Egyptians believed that the pharaohs who ruled over them were actually divine, and so they worked tirelessly to build the pyramids as a way of pleasing their gods. In fact, they likely put in 12-hour days, 6 days a week, with very little time off for rest or relaxation. What's more, they probably only got paid in food rations, which means that many of the people working on the pyramids were effectively slaves. So, how did they do it? Well, it all started with planning. Before laying down a single block, the builders would have surveyed the land and created a plan for the pyramid. They would have used this plan to guide them as they moved each stone into place. But they wouldn't have been able to do any of this without the help of advanced mathematics. The Egyptians were well versed in geometry and knew how to use basic formulas like the Pythagorean theorem. They used this knowledge to make sure that each layer of the pyramid was level and that the angles were all correct. If even one stone was placed incorrectly, the entire structure could come crashing down. So precision was of the utmost importance. But even with the best planning in the world, the builders still needed a way to move the stones. They could have done it the hard way by dragging the stones along the ground. But this would have taken an enormous amount of manpower and time. Instead, they developed a more efficient method by using wooden sledges to slide the stones across the ground. The workers would have carved grooves into the ground to help the sledges move more easily. They would also have used a system of levers and pulleys to lift the stones onto the sledges. Once the stones were in place, the workers would have attached ropes to them and pulled them towards the pyramid. Believe it or not, this method was so effective that the Egyptians used it to move stones for thousands of years. In fact, they even used it to move stones for the construction of temples and other buildings. Now that we know how the Egyptians moved the stones, let's talk about how they lifted them up. One popular theory is that the Egyptians used ramps to move the stones up the pyramid. This theory is supported by evidence found at the base of the pyramids, which suggests that ramps were used to transport the stones from the ground to the higher levels of the pyramid. Another possibility is that the Egyptians used a crane-like device to lift the stones. This device would have consisted of a series of levers and pulleys that would have allowed the workers to lift the stones up the pyramid. There is some evidence to support this theory, but it is not as strong as the evidence for the ramp theory. Regardless of how the stones were lifted, it is clear that the builders were incredibly skilled engineers and architects. We know that the builders used copper tools to shape the stones, but what we're not sure of is how they cut the stones in the first place. Some researchers believe that the Egyptians used a basic tool called a hammerstone to split the limestone. This would have involved placing a large rock or piece of limestone on top of the stone, and then striking it with a hammer-like tool made of harder material like granite. The force of the blow would have caused the limestone to crack and break apart. Other researchers believe that the Egyptians used a saw-like tool to cut the limestone. This would have involved using a sharp piece of rock or metal to slowly slice through the limestone. This method would have taken longer but would have resulted in a cleaner cut. No matter which method they used, the builders were able to create some of the most precise stonework in history. In addition to the incredible engineering feats required to build the pyramids, the builders also had to contend with some pretty dangerous animals. In fact, there is evidence that a group of baboons attacked and killed several workers during the construction of the pyramids. This is because the builders often worked in areas where baboons lived, and the animals felt threatened by the humans. The workers would have had to protect themselves from the baboons by using spears and other weapons. It is truly amazing to think that the pyramids were built over 4,000 years ago and yet they still stand today. These structures are a testament to the skill and ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians, and they continue to baffle scientists and historians to this day. Maybe one day we will uncover even more secrets about the pyramids and learn how these incredible structures were really built. So, what do you think? How do you think the pyramids were built? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.